Brew Strong is brought to you by Blickman Engineering, home of the Riptide. Visit them online at blickmanengineering.com.
Brewers, it's time for the beer radio you've been looking for. This is the show that dispels myths, tackles the toughest topics, and makes no apologies for geeking out on beer. Hosted by two guys that drink before they think. Jamil Zainasheff and John Palmer. This is Brew Strong.
Hey, howdy, hey, my brewing brothers and sisters. I'm Jamil Zainasheff.
I'm Travis Campbell.
And I'm Mike Persine, and you're listening to Brew Strong.
All right.
With the guns.
Yeah, you almost sound like the announcer.
I was trying.
Except it sounds like you got that nut thing.
I was thinking when you said
Except
that.
for that nut thing. Oh, yeah. It's good to be back. It's been a little while because we had like a Christmas, a New Year's, a January. I'm not sure when we last did shows. It may have been in January, but darned if I can remember. But I got a lot of traveling coming up. I'm going to be gone for like 5 weeks, starting in March and through early April. So I was like, well, we need to get some shows in the hopper there, or we're going to be in trouble. And all right, so many things to cover. One, I'm going to be traveling, and I'm going to Iceland with family, then Sweden for the Brewers Conference in Malmo. Then I'm going to do a couple of collab beers there. They're going to be on tap while I'm there. One with Malmo Brewing and one with Brewhouse 19. Wonderful brewers, all of them. It's going to be some great beers. If you're around Malmo, or you want to go to a Brewers Conference and a great beer fest, head to Malmo. Then from there, I'm going to Munich for Strong Beer Fest, Stark Beer Fest.
Interesting.
That's where all they're serving Doppelbocks, right? So everybody goes to Oktoberfest, but they don't know that you can go to Stark Beer Fest, the Strong Beer Fest. And so I'm going to go and enjoy lots of strong beer, and going to do some brewery tours, the on decks, and Einger and Augustiner and Paulaner, and yeah, it's going to be a blast. Then I'm off to Brussels for a few days. I'm going to visit, probably stop by Rodenbach, and then go to visit a friend of mine in Rotterdam, and then over to England, Nottingham, York, Birmingham, Brighton. Jason Ledford's coming. Matt Thomas is coming. My dear friend Mitch Steele is going to be there with his wife. We're gonna do hand brewing. Is brewing essentially an Evil 3 there, which is really something special there because all the duties, the taxes, are really high. So it makes brewing one of those beers like, a lost, you just can't, it just costs you more to brew it than you can make off of the thing. So they're going to probably lose money on this thing, but they're doing it because they love the idea. And Mitch and I love it. So Mitch and I are going to be there. We're actually going to be online. Oh, Jesus. February 28th, next week from today, we're going to be online doing, we'll be there for the MASH, and we'll be there for the Whirlpool, be answering questions, both Mitch and I. So that'll be a blast. And then we're going to be there for the release. And the release is April 5th, Friday, April 5th. It's going to be a beer crawl, pub crawl party thing. It's going to start at Hand in Hand in Brighton. And we're going to hit all the pubs that have it on tap. And then we're going to end up back at Hand in Hand. I'll probably need a liver exchange at that point, but it will be amazing. Then over to Portsmouth for a day. There's a couple of great little craft breweries there. There's the HMS Mary Rose, which I really want to see. So it's going to be a hell of a trip. If anybody listening is in any of those cities or going to be in any of those cities, hey, reach out. Let me know. I'd love to meet up with you. I'm sorry.
I have a name for you to consider.
Yes.
Evil 3,000 shilling.
There you go. For the taxes, it's going to cost per pint.
Right.
Then you may have heard our dear friend John Blickman is retiring. What does that mean for us? I don't know. Who cares? I mean, I do care. But immediately when Travis broke the news to me, I didn't even get Blickman didn't even let me know. But I got an idea that we should have a retirement party for John Blickman. So
I like it.
One of the things that we did over the course of time was we did a prize for people who had bought Blickman gear over the course of an entire year. John Blickman, John Palmer, and myself, we went out to brew with that person. Turned out that person was Kevin Drake in Kings Beach, northern Lake Tahoe. And after that, a couple of years after that, he opened Alibi Ale Works. And so it's kind of cool that he opened that. And I've kept in touch with him, and I've been there, and he's making great beer. And so I thought, what better than to bring back John Blickman out to Kings Beach to hang out at Alibi Ale Works. We're going to do a collab beer. Palmer's going to be there. I'm going to be there. I think we got Justin to show up there. And I think Michael is probably going to be there with us. Yeah.
Heck yeah. It's right up the road from me.
Yeah. It's going to be
30 minutes.
May 4th of 2024. It is a Saturday. That's the day of the party. We'll probably be in Reno on the Friday before, but get yourself out to Alibi Ale Works on the May 4th, Saturday, May 4th. It'll probably be sometime in the afternoon, I'm hoping. Come out, we'll party. Blickman, I'll be there. Palmer will be there. I think Justin's going to be there. Michael's going to be there. It's going to be a blast. So, come on out, do that. And, support, for one last time, come out and say thank you to John Blickman for sponsoring this show. You can see all their stuff at blickmanengineering.com. Blickman Engineering is still going to continue. He is kind of passing the reins to his second in command. And I'm sure, since John Blickman's a little addled in the brain, probably things will improve now that he's going. That's what I'm thinking.
I don't think so.
Well,
I think they're going to be the exact same.
There you go.
Well, come to Alibi Ale Works and find out how many brain cells John Blickman still has.
That sounds like a great time.
Yeah. And then one more. People have been asking for Brew Strong merch. They're like, hey, can't get Brew Strong merch. It's not on the Brewing Network site anymore. Yeah, I apologize for that. You can get Brew Strong merch and Mr. Malty merch if you're a Mr. Malty fan, which I know you are. There's an Etsy store called Mr. Malty, capital M, lowercase r, capital M, ALTY, Mr. Malty at the Etsy thing. It is www.etsy.com/shop/Mr. Malty. And all profits from that actually go in my pocket. So there you go. It's not much, but hey, I'll take any Quatloos I can get.
You have to pay for that trip to Reno somehow.
You get exactly. You know what Quatloos are, right?
I like how all the travel. You got to pay for that trip to Reno.
yeah. The trip to Reno. The other stuff, it's near free.
Right.
This is the Reno stuff that really sets me back. And I was just up there, just up hanging out with Michael. It was a blast. Yeah. It went for a kind of a Valentine's Day romp. The wife went and saw Bert Kreischer. It was great at the GSR. It was a blast. The machine. Yes. TC, if you don't know Bert Kreischer, you should look him up.
I shall, because I don't.
You would enjoy the heck out of him. He's great. He really is great.
I think you'd like the visuals the most.
Yeah.
Scaring me, Mike.
It's just, I mean, he's just us. He's just us hanging out. Yeah.
Hey, make sure you invite him to that to Blickman's retirement party.
I shall.
There you go.
Nice.
He's in Los Angeles. God knows he could be somewhere around the world. He's become quite famous. The machine has become quite famous. Today, we've got so many questions about fermentation. I just kind of bundled a bunch up into kind of a fermentation focused show to answer your questions. These are not quick ones. That's why they haven't been answered in years. All right. Paul asks back in 2014.
Hello.
I mean, hey, it's less than a decade. Give me a break. Paul asks, I recently bought Brewing Classic Styles, and in the book, Jamil suggests decanting the beer from a yeast starter. The method described in BCS suggests cold crashing a starter and states that it may take a day or two to cold crash. I'm confused about when to make a yeast starter of it if it takes a few days to cold crash. That's a good point. Should I make a starter 5 days before brew day, cold crash for a day or two, and then let the yeast wake up on brew day? Thanks, Paul. So it doesn't take, it might take a day for the yeast to settle. It depends on the yeast. Some yeast will settle much quicker than others. So it could take 2 days, but generally, it can take less than a day for the yeast to really settle out. The point is you don't want there to be a lot of yeast in the liquid and then pour the liquid off, lose a bunch of yeast.
That's your finishers.
Yeah. So it shouldn't take several days for the starter to go. The starter, generally, all growth is done generally within 24 hours, I would say. Anywhere between 18 and 40 hours, all your growth is done anyways. On a stir plate, it's probably even quicker than that. So, you make starter, one day and then, put it in the fridge the next day and it should be settled out. And then the next day you can just go direct pitching it in. You don't have to wake it up. You could if you want, but I don't think you'd need to. What are you guys doing? How are you handling this?
I went straight towards the end where he said, wake up. And I thought he might not mean what you and I mean is wake up. But we should save that one for later. I mean, for an ale, I don't chill mine necessarily. I spin for a day, settle for a day, decant, pitch. I'll get pretty close to pitching temp. That's 66. Not very cool. I mean, that's warmer than your room temp right now, probably, Jamil, based on that hoodie. But on the lager, I'm going to treat it differently. I'm going to give it more time for settling, get it to a nice cooler temperature, et cetera. But basically, that's about all I do.
Yeah. How about you, Michael?
Yeah. So if I'm brewing on Saturday, I figure I'll be pitching later that evening or that afternoon, 5 to 7, somewhere in there. So I usually make a starter that Thursday. So 2 days prior, 48 hours, like you said. I use a stir plate. So I do 14 hours on the stir plate. It cuts the stirring, let it finish out. When I start to see kind of everything going to sleep, I end up putting it in the fridge, usually that Friday night, and it has a whole day to kind of chill. And and ales, lagers, I don't really differentiate. A lot of what I feel like with decanting has to do with the size of the starter and if it's going to affect.
Right.
For me, I'm more about affecting the starting gravity and kind of throwing those numbers off. So I will decant larger starters. If I made like a little baby starter just to wake stuff up, then I don't really care. But if I made like a big 5-liter starter for a lager or something, I will definitely give it the whole day, decant off. I try to decant off as much as I can without getting that cake coming off, out the top. So I really go for it. And then, because I figure any of that beer that has any kind of suspended yeast in it, I mean, those are the yeast cells that you kind of don't want because they don't flock. So
yeah, if they're real dusty,
so
you can leave those behind. I wouldn't worry about those. And you could chill it and and then the morning decant it the morning of or leave it sitting there, let it warm up a little bit before before brew time, before pitching time, like the start of or some point during the day, let it kind of come up to whatever temperature, or leave it cold if you're doing a lager.
I've heard conflicting information about the hot versus cold versus same temp versus whatever. I mean, there's certain companies that advertise store cold, pitch cold. So I don't really even mind if it comes right out of the fridge and goes in the fermenter. So it hasn't hurt the beers.
You want to be within, maximum 10 degrees C, 10 degrees Fahrenheit, even less is better, because it does stress the yeast and they end up using their efforts to create these heat shock proteins. Whether it's going cold to hot or hot to cold, they will do that. And you really don't want that to happen. So it's best to be within a certain temperature. Even, the dry yeast manufacturers will say, hey, try and be within, 10 degrees and less is better, I think.
That gentleman, did he tell you, you interviewed him. Was he at 10C?
I don't think we discussed that maybe.
Okay. I thought it came up in that show.
It might have.
For me, 10C is pretty huge. I'm not saying
it's about 20F.
I don't do it, so I don't know how the effect is. I get it within 5, maybe 6. Yeah. It's easy.
Yeah. I like to stay within, 10 maximum. Let's do this. Let's take a short break. And when we come back, we'll have more of your questions right after this.
Are you looking for a simple brewing system that's great for all grain brewing, but everything on the market seems to be full of compromises? Blickman Engineering has the answer. The Blickman Brew Easy All Grain Brewing System. The Brew Easy is a complete system with easy upgrades and a beautiful compact design, perfect for any size brewing location. At its core, the Brew Easy is built on 2 gorgeous Blickman Boilermaker brew kettles, a high-temperature March pump, and either a top-tier gas burner or the new Boil Coil electric heater. The Brew Easy adapter lid allows the pots to stack on top of each other, forming an efficient, strong, and compact brewing setup that comes in 5, 10, and 20-gallon batch sizes. Upgrade your Brew Easy system with full automated control by adding a Blickman Tower of Power temp controller and make moving around easy with the Blickman Kettle Cart. The Brew Easy is modular. If you already own a Boilermaker kettle, you can build your Brew Easy by purchasing just the modules you need. The new Brew Easy all-grain brewing system. See it today at BlickmanEngineering.com and brew with Blickman quality on your new Brew Easy.
Learning to brew has never been so disgusting. This is Brew Strong.
All right, we're back. You're listening to Brew Strong, and I got my buddies TC and Michael, and we are talking yeast and fermentation. Andrew is listening in the rather warm Melbourne, and people talking about the concept of pitching starters at high Krausen of the starter. So no sleep, cooling, pitch it 12 to 18 hours after starting. Our friend John Palmer thinks so. Yes, absolutely. You can do that as well. The issue with a lot of starters is that the quality of the spent starter wort is not very good. The flavor of it is going to be hot alcohols and intense esters, and it's not something you want to add, to a lager or a lot of different beers. And especially if it's a larger starter, it can be problematic. So that's why a lot of times we want to decant the spent wort, the beer that's made in the starter, and then pitch just the yeast. Or if you've harvested yeast, one of my favorite things is to collect the yeast from the previous batch, give it a rinse, and then store it. And then the day of brewing, wake it up with some wort at a reasonable temperature. Then it's kind of like a mini ferment and gets it going. And then it's really rocking and rolling. I kind of like that. What do you guys think on?
Yeah, I same exact thought process where it depends on the size of the starter, and then kind of with the high Krausen, you're basically pitching the yeast when they're fully in the middle of their metabolism cycle, so they go right to work. You would have almost zero lag time. Because they're just going to get right down to it. So yeah, that's a really good way. But like you said, I would encourage people, if they've never tried starter wort, to just take a little sip. Yeah. It's not going to kill you, just to kind of get an idea of what we mean when we say it doesn't taste good, because It is not good. It's awful. I every time I tried, I was like, why did I just do that? But it might be worth it for your brewing experience to try it out. So it's not that bad. I'm being dramatic.
A good decant to me once tasted almost exactly like Miller Lite. No kidding. And I was like, well, that's odd. And it was a lager. It was ale yeast on top of it. But like Mike said on the last question, dilution. You don't need to dilute your beer with that flavor, whatever that flavor is, for that alcohol. It's not likely what you're brewing. If it is, you should have just made a bigger starter and you already had your beer. Mm-hmm. But I decant until I have just enough to get that slurry pourable. I try to target to be just enough. So
you can get all the yeast out of the flask or whatever.
Yeah, you're not sitting there, give you a good motion, jerking that cake trying to get it out the flask.
That was quite for all the podcasters not watching the video, that was worth a watch.
Yeah. There you go. Well, and also worth a watch is if you see this live, you can actually ask your questions. You go to the comments section, and we're actually watching the comments section on Facebook there. And that's how Andrew asked his question. You just go to the comment section and you type in your comment as a question, and we are there. All right. I think that was a good question to kick us off. Yeah. I think you each earn a point off of that. Good job. Yay. Good job.
Oh crap! Here we go.
Now for your bonus question. Here, your audio round. Your special question. What one-hit wonder song starts out with the phrase "ooga shaka, ooga shaka, ooga shaka, ooga ooga ooga"? Oh wow! No
bonus. No,
you're close.
That's the lyric. Sorry, I know.
If it was Jeopardy, I'm waiting for that.
You're close. Close. Michael,
I don't have an answer.
Chance to steal?
I got nothing. I've heard that song before.
It's a Tom Jones song, correct?
No.
What am I thinking of?
This is worth 5 points.
I'll wait for the bonus round.
You're close. Bonus. You're close.
Who is Limp Bizkit?
Come on. It is hooked on a feeling.
Oh. Okay.
Blue Suede, 1974. This is what I was rocking out to when I was 13 years old.
Can we take points from you for saying that or no?
There's no way of taking or giving points to the game master. It's just how it is. Just how it is. I had my 8-track player jamming Hooked on a Feeling.
Serious question. How many times did you play that 8-track before just 8 to take?
It played it a lot.
Okay, that's good.
I mean, I had like a stereo home unit that played the 8 tracks. It wasn't like a car deck. Right. Come on.
Yeah, because for people that don't know, an 8-track is a continuous loop.
Yes. I was 13 years old. I did not have a car.
But you had a stereo. Stereo, Jamil, or a stereo, Jamil?
And I think it was 1974-ish, 75-ish. And I was 8-track was already on the way out. And I think for $5, I got the 8-track player and a bunch of 8-track for $5. So at some yard sale. And that's what I rocked out to.
I had Steve Martin on 8-track.
Nice. You're too young to have 8-track.
Well, as my dad upgraded to not 8-track, it ended up in my
bedroom. You ended up with 8-track. Right. Yep, that makes sense. All right. Well, I think Travis deserves a couple of points, partial credit for that. I would give you 2 points. 2 points for that. That's pretty good.
I thought Mike's witty response deserved more than 2 points.
I'm so too young for that. Sorry. Cassette is as far back as I go.
Yes. All right. Matt, he asks, Matt from Virginia asks, here's a pitch rate calculator question I'm sure you get frequently. So let's get it on the air. With fresh yeast and low gravity, the pitch rate calculator frequently tells me to pitch 1 pack into 1 liter, regardless of gravity. That makes sense that waking the yeast up is a good thing. Yeah, you don't want to put your starter wort into too small an environment or your yeast pitch into too small an environment. It's fine for a little bit of time, like you're waking it up. But if you're looking for growth, you're not going to get it in less than a liter generally. But sometimes I'm making a multi-step starter and need to know approximately how much yeast will be produced. So please tell me if this is proper usage of your tool. Pause for inevitable joke. He's using my tool. He's cracking up. If I keep bumping the gravity up until it tells me to make a starter greater than a liter, then can I assume that the amount of yeast cells needed is a fair estimate of how much is in my starter? That's probably correct. Doesn't that imply that I'm overpitching lower gravity beers? Could be, but it's difficult to overpitch. You could, and maybe using a bit less would get you a bit more ester production or, a different character to the beer. But, you could always, put a bit less in. Can I punch this cell count number in manually as the viability number for a second step starter? Viability number for a second step starter.
And he's gaming the date on the pack to get a viability to get a count. And I would say I've used your calculator every way I can, especially now that Blickman comes out with Chris comes out with the 1.5 packs.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to do things to make it look like 3 packs instead of 1 pack.
Right.
Yeah. So I would. The short answer to him is I would say, yeah, use that calculator any way you want. It makes great beer.
Well, and what I need to do is recreate the calculator.
It's a novel idea. Never heard that one before.
The website is that I created the very first yeast pitch calculator. And then everybody started, I got so much traffic to my website, which I didn't monetize, didn't really care. It was a tool to help people. And then everybody's started trying to reverse engineer the data. And they took a whole bunch of data points, made their own curves. And so they're pretty close. They're not exactly the same, but whatever. Yeah, I think TC's right. You can monkey around with it. And the underlying formula, the underlying curve that predicts how much yeast is going to be produced is still accurate, regardless of how you kind of get to that point.
Now, is that using a stir plate, or is it just manually stirring? Or
well, the yeast pitch calculator had both stirred and non-stirred, shaken. It had settings for all those things.
Yeah.
Don't tell me that thing failed before Limp Bizkit came out.
I was just saying, I see your game, Jamil. You just wanted everybody to play with your tool. You didn't want to monetize. You just wanted people touching your tool.
There was a disclaimer at the bottom of the website that says, P.S. I should be paying you.
Michael is correct. Michael gets 2 points for that. The game is tied.
The only thing I can say about this starter calculator is, like Jamil said, it's hard to overpitch. And then when you're using these, they are models. They're not perfect. And unless you're plating and hemocytometer counting and getting actual pitch rates, you're getting a good estimate. So track it all, brew it, taste it. If you liked it, do it again with that same setup.
Yeah. And it's hard to overpitch.
Right. To finish.
Let's see here. Matt says, back in 2014, says, Jamil and John, when using the yeastcalculator.com, sorry, Jamil. See, there's people coming out with, it was 2014. They already had this on. To calculate my starter size, there is a box that shows inoculation rate in millions per mil. It states that inoculation rates should be between 25 and 100 to maximize the health and vitality of the yeast. I typically brew for 3-gallon batches, so I don't need to make big starters with my stir plate. But when I input, say, half a liter as my starter size to get the necessary pitching rate, my inoculation rate can jump to nearly 200 million per mil, nearly twice the upper range of the recommended amount. I understand the reasoning behind this concept, but is there a different range that you go by? And how important is this really? Should I just make a big enough starter to stay within this range and save enough of the created yeast for future batch? Thanks, Matt. Okay, couple of things. One is, in the previous question, we were talking about, the reason the Mr. Multi calculator always said, well, you got to start with a liter. Don't go below a liter. Was in this, it'll let you go below a liter. And it's like, well, no, then your inoculation rate gets too high. You're essentially kind of screwing with the yeast. You're starting them up and then they just burn their reserves. They don't have enough. There isn't enough sugars and nutrients there for them to really start to grow. So you're kind of spinning their wheels, and the yeast can actually end up worse off than if you didn't use a starter. So there are times when you don't need to make a starter. You have enough yeast. And unless you're wanting to grow yeast in a starter, and then, you could do a 1 liter starter and then split the amount of that yeast in half that you get, store half of it, or brew 2 batches, or store some of it and then make a starter from that next time you want to brew. But you don't have to make a starter. You could just take the Y yeast or White Labs or Imperial or, BSI or whoever, and you can just throw it directly in. You're good to go. You don't necessarily always have to make a starter. I like the idea of waking it up, adding your yeast to some wort and just making sure that it's active. And it looks like, most of those yeast are good to go. Because if you don't, you make all your wort and then the yeast are dead, which I've had happen. Some strains of yeast are really sensitive and get a package of yeast and nothing. So that's why I like to do the wake up thing, even if you're not making a starter.
But you're waking it up right before your pitch. When I say right, day of pitch versus making a super saturated starter 2 days in advance and ending up with nothing. You're saying, go ahead and make your super saturated. It looks like a starter. That's really waking it up. Do that the day you're brewing and be ready to use it as it's coming up.
Michael?
I mean, yeah, you can. I tend to just throw the packet in there. I haven't tried that method where I just wake them up. I figure
when you have like a dead bunch of yeast and then it's sitting there for 2 days and you're just like, this ain't working. This ain't taking off.
I have had that. So it freaked me out. I've had like a Belgian take 48 hours to even make a bubble in my blowout.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Now I was going to try to get your guys' thoughts on the different pitch rate units, because there's that million cells per mil, but then there's also million cells per milliliter per degree Plato, which is the one that I use. And I like that the per Plato. So it has to do with the strength of the wort affects your pitch rate as well. So
that's the correct one. That's the pitch rate. If you're not including that, I think in this question, in that calculator, I took a look at that calculator. They're talking about the inoculation rate of the starter. And they're saying, don't go beyond. Again, that kind of ignores, starter strength, but, let's assume, it's a starter, an average starter. So I think it's a good idea to be between. I don't think 25 is necessary. I think there should be no lower rate. That does make sense to me. You may not, the lower number makes zero sense to me. Shouldn't be between 25 and 100. It should be 0 and 100. Right? If you have one yeast cell, you could throw it into the ocean of wort and you'll get growth. Maybe you're wasting some starter wort, but that's all. That's the only bad thing that'll happen to you there.
I wonder if they recommend it because their calculator won't properly do a growth. If you under pitch, it'll show more growth than you'd actually get. No, it won't say, no, you can't get that much growth. So maybe instead of limiting the calculator to 4x or so, it says, it's all kinds of extra sugars in here. It'll go 10x. I don't know. I don't know much about that calculator for sure.
Maybe. Yeah, I don't know either. But 100 as a max sounds, reasonable, I guess. Hard to say. I'd have to run the numbers. But, pretty good. Pretty good. Good question. And if you have questions, you can ask them either live in the chat when we're doing these shows live, or you can email them to brewstrong@thebrewingnetwork.com, and we will get to those questions. We're getting the new questions we are totally caught up on. We're getting to those right away. The old questions, I'm bound and determined to answer every question that was ever sent in. So that's why these old questions come up, because we're all caught up on the new ones. So ask your new questions. We'll get to them, generally by the next show. Speaking of new questions, Andrew, he's following up. He says, does chilling the starter prompt the yeast to store glycerols? So yes, shift phases, but provide a benefit. And for a lager, should a starter volume be bigger than 2 liters? Is volume the most limiting factor for yeast multiplication? Oh, you're already answering this. Yeast will generally, you'll get about 4x growth on yeast, or four buddings on the yeast. That's kind of the limit, even if you have a massive volume. And then there's ways you can manipulate that with keeping them in an aerobic state. Versus letting them get into fermentation. There are ways to do it, but not really that user friendly for the home brewer. Yes, so crash chilling the starter can cause the yeast to store glycerols. They try to pack in a little bit of energy to keep them alive during, a period of no sugar. And when you chill them, so the yeast manufacturers will do that. They will chill the yeast at a very specific point, and that causes them to take up some energy and store it for a future, when they wake up again. So yes, that can help. Brent in the chat says, did my log beer, nice, clean, tart beer, and I'm sure there is a mixture of Brett, sack, and lac in it. Suggestions on banking or even making a starter. I know these all don't propagate at the same rate, so you would be surprised at how a mixed culture kind of survives and does well. The thinking in the past was mixed culture, it's not going to work out because something will dominate and cause the mixed culture to not be in balance in the future. But it seems to me, through all the things that I've done with existing mixed cultures and repitching mixed cultures, is that perhaps the cell counts are different, but the resulting flavor of the beer tends to be the same. It's like maybe the flavor comes on at different phases, but in general, the souring will still happen and the funky will still happen. Everything will still happen. So I would just, collect the yeast off of your mixed fermentation. And then, just, treat it like anything else. Just be aware that, you are working with bacteria and wild yeast, and you don't want to necessarily get that in some of your other beers. So be careful with that. Have you guys messed around with mixed fermentation and repitching?
I have not. -2 points.
I can only say that I actually tried this beer right after I left hanging out with you, Jamil. He had it at the Homebrew Club meeting.
Uh-huh.
It is pretty good. I mean, for throwing a log in some wort and letting things happen, I mean, it is, like you said, it's pretty dang clean. The sourness is intense, but it is well balanced. And so I just want to say good job, Brent. That was a good beer. Good luck repitching. But no, I haven't. It's on my list of things to do.
Or relogging. Maybe you should just save the log, dry it out, and reuse the log every time. This is essentially what the Norwegians did, right? With the Kvikis.
Yep. I don't know about you, Travis. I have a fear of contaminating my brewery. So, and then I'm not too keen on sour beers, so I don't really want to risk it.
You don't want to dip your log in your wort.
Yeah, I know. As much as, man, there's the temptation of just log dipping. I've withheld.
I've tasted a gamut of sour beers, and some were excellent and some were horrible. I feel like I shouldn't experiment and find out where mine lie.
He wants to dip his log in some beer.
Okay, let's take another break, and we'll be back with a couple more questions right after this.
Back to the beer guys that make other beer guys look like wine guys. Brew strong.
All right, we're back. You're listening to Brew Strong. We are answering questions on fermentation. Oh, we got a few more to kind of get through. Effects of fermenter geometry. This is one of my favorite things. Early on as a home brewer, I've read about the effects of fermenter geometry, or maybe I thought, this has got to make some sort of difference. People were talking about fermenting in a plastic bucket versus fermenting in a carboy versus fermenting in a corny keg. And so I'm just like, well, I'll just do all three side by side and see if there's any difference. Sure enough, there was. It was surprising to me. And that's what kind of got me on the whole fermenter geometry thing, which kind of got me onto open fermentation. Martin was asking, and he copied Brian from Mystic Brewery. And Brian actually gave him an answer. Which I'm going to read. I'm going to just boldly go because it was copied on me to me too. Let's see. First off, I want to thank you for all what I've learned through your generous sharing of information. I'm in the final stages of planning a microbrewery to be located near Montreal in Quebec. And one important aspect is the fermentation and storage of my beers. Looking at what is available on the market, I see that different fermenter shapes are used. Of course, most breweries use conical shaped fermenters. Some use slightly sloped or lightly coned dish bottom fermenters. For example, the Latina fermenters. I don't know what that is. And others, like you, Brian, use square fermenters, IBC wine totes at Mystic Brewing. What is the effect of fermenter geometry on the fermentation profile? What are the technical advantages and disadvantages of each? Any reference document would be of great help. I'll be producing mostly Belgian ale types of beers along with barrel-aged sours. Thanks again, Martin. I wonder how Martin did with his brewery. That's just back from 2015, 8 years later. Brian answered, Martin, the quick answer is, as I'm on the way out the door, is jacketed conicals allow for excellent temperature control and uniform defined yeast metabolism and thus flavor profile. Very good for lagers. And the cone allows easy yeast harvesting of the bottom fermenting lager yeast strains. Square fermenters are typically not jacketed all the way around and allow for more freedom of expression, in quotes, in your yeast, i.e. they ferment at various temperatures with various metabolic, thank you.
They eat stuff.
Pathways. God, I don't know what's wrong. I'm getting old. Pathways going at the same time. It's not all just me. There's a few typos in these things. It's actually quite difficult to make many Belgian ales on cylinder conicals. They're too strict, he says. However, squares can be difficult to harvest from. Depends on if you are using strains that you can top crop. Besides shape, the other big issue is hydrostatic pressure. Yeast metabolism is also strongly affected by hydrostatic pressure. I commonly hear issues with strains fermenting too clean in very large fermenters. Certainly, there may be tricks to get around these issues, but we prefer the simplest approach. Good luck and cheers, Brian. So that was very nice. Brian actually has a PhD at Mystic Brewery in Massachusetts. You had a chance, go visit him. So yeah, I generally agree with what Brian's saying there. Fermenter geometry, one of the things about the cylinder conical is it's very advantageous to the mixing of the wort. So the yeast tend to, cause a stirring of the cylinder, and it, because of the shape, it tends to work very well. Yes, the yeast will drop, even top fermenting yeast, top cropping yeast will eventually drop to the bottom, and you can harvest them off there. And if you do that regularly enough, for example, Fuller's had, open fermentation and they were top cropping their yeast, and then they switched to cylinder conicals, and eventually the yeast learned to, through selective pressure, they were harvesting off the bottom, and their yeast became bottom cropping yeast. The big problem with the cylinder conicals is, they tend to be very tall when you get into the big commercial stuff, and there's more hydrostatic pressure. Also, they're closed top, and so it collects more CO2 at the top, and you end up with cleaner fermentations, less ester production. And that is not always a good thing. And a lot of American yeast, American beer styles, since almost everybody uses cylinder conicals, we've kind of gone over to, we want everything to taste clean, minimal esters. So that's not always the best thing. If you're trying to brew, Belgians or British, beers or things like that, you gotta have that ester production. So that's kind of an issue with the cylinder conicals. One of the things about, square shaped or, fermenters with corners in them, I forget where I saw it, but there's a thing about dead corners. I think it may have been a George Fix book. So if you can imagine in a corner, how hard it is to clean the corner of a container. It's the same thing, because the action of the yeast and the movement of the beer as it's fermenting, the corners are what you call dead corners. So they don't tend to mix as much. And so that area tends to not get as well fermented and mixed. So it tends to, when fermentations are done in containers that have square corners, you get an increase in diacetyl production and, slightly less attenuation because of that as well, the corners as well. So that's a thing about that. I think, his comments on, jacketing and things like that. You can get jacketed square containers now that can be moved around with forklifts and stuff. Kind of fun. Just generally, fermenter geometry does make a difference. Have you guys messed around with different fermenter geometries?
I have not.
Metabolic.
I have not, but I had a thought. I think it's a great discussion. Is it going to matter if you have something about the size of a corny, something of the size of a carboy, something of the size of a conical? Versus what they've been using historically to do hectoliters that I can't do the math on. Mm-hmm. Is it going to make a difference on a homebrew level? Just curiosity.
Yes, it
is.
I can confirm that. Practical experience, yes, and maybe even more so. As you let's say you have a square container and you start increasing the size of it, the corners remain about the same size. Maybe they grow a little bit, but the internal volume becomes much larger. So the larger it gets, the more volume of beer that doesn't have the effect. It's kind of diluting the corner.
So you have a higher ratio of corner to not corner in a smaller environment than a larger environment.
Yes, exactly.
Interesting.
I would say though, and Jamil, correct me if I'm wrong, like you said, with the really tall 30-foot high conicals, those are going to have more of an effect on that
hydrostatic
ester
pressure
production than like my little my little 2-footer here. So
your small your small vessel
with my small vessel,
yes, your small vessel won't have as much pressure.
My small cylinder,
pressure. Yes, your small cylinder, your small cylinder conical.
Yeah, so maybe in that instance, it's actually a little bit more on the large scale. But it is kind of interesting to note, though, like I've heard that a lot of people really discourage trying to ferment in a corny keg for that because of that tall cylindrical shape, just because of the way the mixing and the fermentation happens in this skinny, tall vessel versus like a wider something with like a bucket or my fermenter. So,
let's say you had a 2-inch diameter pipe that was, 40 foot long. You fill it with wort, and that's your fermentation vessel. And you drop your yeast in, and, most of the yeast just goes to the bottom and it starts fermenting there. It may not mix sufficiently enough. One of the problems with large fermenters in breweries, and we had this issue at Heretic, was that when you're multi-batching into them, you can get stratification, and the fermentation will just lay there, and the gravity is different enough. After just a day, the gravity is different enough that they won't mix, and fermentation will just happen like underneath. And then sometimes it will all of a sudden you get this tremendous mixing all of a sudden. And we notice this because we get these wild temperature swings. So it matters. So corny kegs, I don't think are a very good fermentation vessel, but tall and skinny, but maybe better than some others. If you ferment in a 2-inch deep, wide, flat pan, that's going to be different than if you ferment in a 2-inch wide, 4-foot tall pan or vessel. It does change things. It will matter. Catherine from Washington State says, "Glad you got the stream going. We are too." Yes, it was a bit of a challenge. Let's see here. All right, so good question from Martin. Does anybody know if he opened his brewery in Montreal? Be nice to find out. It's only 9 years later. Yeah, no big deal. Sean from Pittsburgh asks, "Dear John and Jamil, this is again 2015. Can you do a show on open fermentation? I can't find much technical information related to this topic. There are some point-to-counterpoint discussions online, but nothing convincing or definitive. For example, point, increased oxygen availability to the yeast leads to increased organic acid production and therefore increased ester production. Counterpoint, CO2 evolution during active fermentation will prevent oxygen from reaching the fermentation. And point, Shallower fermenters result in reduced osmotic pressure and therefore increased ester production. At a point on the homebrew scale, the differences in osmotic pressure are negligible compared to a pro scale. Can you tell us what's really going on when open fermenting? Thank you, Sean. I am a big fan of open fermentation. It really makes a world of difference in the character of the beer. The fermentation changes drastically just using the same yeast. I was recently in Dusseldorf, and all the Dusseldorf alt beer producers not all, but the really great ones are using open fermentation. It's how it's been done there, and it makes a big difference. When I got back, all the alt beer I've been brewing over the years using the yeast from White Labs, Y yeast, came up, just too clean tasting. People say they're really clean. A lot of these fermentations, they start at 68 degrees Fahrenheit. When you see, they're ripping. They're not, cold fermenting them as people might think. And they're open fermented. So I when I got back, I used open fermentation using the White Labs yeast, and sure enough, correct fermentation flavor made a huge difference. A lot of the open fermentation in other parts of the world commercially, they're not any deeper than, I would say, 5 to 6 feet deep. They're not tremendously deep. So the commercial aspect of that is not really true. 5 to 6 is different than, 2, but not hugely different. The other thing about CO2, it's not necessarily the increased oxygen making the organic acid production, although a lot of the British brewers in the past would rouse. They would mix the fermentation. At a certain point in fermentation, they would either dump it to another vessel using the double drop. Talking to John Keeling from Fuller's, he was telling me that the pipe that they dropped it in was a sintered pipe, and sintered, lots of little tiny holes. And the sintered pipe, as you drop the liquid through, would suck in oxygen and mix oxygen or mix air in with the beer. And others would pump it around and splash it in order to get more air into the ferment in order for it to fully attenuate. But that would also, help the yeast along and would produce some other compounds. One of the things that happens is by not having a lid on the fermenter, by having it open, the CO2 that is produced gets removed from the beer. When you have an enclosed fermenter, like a cylindroconical, people will say, "Oh no, it's open. There's no pressure on it. The valves," but it traps CO2 above there, and the partial pressure of gases, the concentration of CO2 is high. You get more CO2 in solution, especially in, the taller the fermenter is, the more CO2 is in solution. It is that CO2 in solution that prevents the yeast from being more active and producing more of those compounds. So you get a cleaner beer, less ester production in a taller fermenter and in an enclosed fermenter. By being open, you get the CO2 removed. The partial pressure of CO2 in the gas, the dissolved CO2, is less. The yeast become more active. They grow more. They ferment faster, all that stuff. There was a really good paper that I was reading just the other day. I made a note of it. It'll be in the next yeast book. I can tell you that. But it was a detailed analysis of the amounts of ester production by removing CO2. And it was mainly because of commercial use of yeast and alcohol production, stuff like that, where they just want it to rip as fast as possible. And, the compounds that are produced. So you don't necessarily, that's why people have asked over the years, I'm just rambling on, but people have asked over the years about, can't I, if a stir plate helps ferment, helps the starter, why can't I'll put my 5-gallon carboy on a stir plate and do fermentation that way. The problem is, the reason that the stirred starter tastes so bad, Michael, like we were talking earlier, is because of the lack of CO2 and the activity of the yeast, and it produces those flavors. That's why you don't put your whole fermenter on a stir plate, and that's why the suppression of yeast activity is CO2 concentration related. That's why open fermentation matters. Again, commercial brewers, it's maybe 4 to 6 feet deep, and then just an open top. One of the things I want to do I'm going to brew a beer with Heretic coming up probably in May after, or maybe April after I get back. I don't know, whatever day. We're going to just blow air through the up arm and out the other, one of the other arms, and just keep flushing the top of the fermentation with air from the compressor, which is essentially sterile air. And we're just going to keep blowing any CO2 produced off of the top of the beer. And I think that we're going to get a good yeast character that's going to taste like open fermentation without any of the risks of open fermentation and contamination. So stay tuned. I will let you know the results. It's going to be a great bitter. So have you guys never open fermented or?
Not intentionally. Every so often, I'll have less pressure on my very small conical. Incidentally, because my PSV bleeds, so I won't have the whole blow off to blah blah blah, and I don't know that it made a difference. If we have time, we come back. I'll ask you a question about the open fermentation in general, but it sounds like Mike's got some good comments coming up.
Yeah, so we had talked about this, and just from a chemical gas solubility standpoint, I wanted to reiterate and kind of shed some more technical things about this. And we all know that pressurized fermentation, where we're using CO2 to pressurize the vessel to inhibit ester production, we all know that works. We've got it all documented and people believe in it. I would say this is the inverse, and it's actually pretty stark when you think about atmospheric air. It only contains about 400 parts per million CO2. So that's like, 0.04 of 1% versus when you have a closed fermentation with a blow off, that's 100% CO2. So in chemical engineering, the way that gas is mixed with liquids, it's all a percentage of the partial pressure in the gas. So when your partial pressure is 100%, you're getting 100% CO2, you're going to have a higher pressure in the liquid, and versus like a 400 parts per million, you're going to have essentially zero concentration of CO2 at steady, once you get to where it's all taken away. So these are very large changes, I would guess, in the fermentation profile for flavor. And I'm really excited. I'm going to do a Hefeweizen next month doing this, where I use this guy, but I was going to pump air in here and then just leave the blow off open. And so we're evacuating the CO2 as I just wanted a lid on it to keep it from having anything fall in it or settle in it or getting wild yeast in there. So that was the only thing I was going to do, but I'm super excited about this. And talking with Jamil, I was getting giddy because it all made sense to me in terms of solubility and that, the gas, the CO2 concentration in the beer is essentially zero during fermentation, because as soon as it's produced, it's evacuated out off the top.
Well, it'll saturate to some point, because it takes longer to desaturate a liquid of gases, saturated gases, than it does to saturate a liquid with gases. So it will take some time for it to come out. So there is still some, but not nearly as much as if you have a enclosed fermenter with gas CO2 on the top. But excellent answer, Michael. And for that, you earn yourself. I'm going to give you both points. Travis, you're going to get 0 for that one.
I've got some bonus material here.
Michael, I'm sure you do.
So one of the things Jamil, the blowing of the air through it, and Mike, considering how you're going to encapsulate your fermenter, and then looking at what the Brits did when we visited Sean's one of Sean's many breweries. He brews everywhere.
You're right. Sam Brooks.
It might not have been that one at the time. I think.
So they had a lid on the top of the the fermenter.
It's nothing. It's just like sheet metal sitting on top.
It was enclosing it. It was keeping CO2 on the top. And one of the things, I loved the beer they were making there at Sam Brooks. but it was cleaner than I would expect. It seemed more modern than old school to me.
Right. He's also using 001 at one of his breweries, so that's pretty modern.
Well, yeah, I don't know. At Sandbrook, I don't think they were, but I would have preferred, a little more ester profile there. Still a great beer. I think it won, the best bitter at GBBF or whatever it was.
So
there's
the other question. So are the Dusseldorf ones, are they totally open?
Totally open. Just a big bin. They scrape the Bronhof of it, and at Zumschlüssel, it actually, they fill it to a very specific point, and then the top of the yeast just sloughs off into a trough into the drain. And they've got it to, it's German, precision. And then it just cuts the top of the Bronhof off of that into the dumper.
Can I ask one more question on this? So with this, we're trying to encourage ester production to get a more expressive fermentation. Would you recommend, though, after High Kreuzen falls, that maybe we should cover it if it's not covered, or maybe you could close it off once you've reached that? I know that some brewers talk about doing their open fermentations, and then they do that for the first 2 or 3 days, and then they close it down to kind of finish it.
Right.
And I just wanted to see what you guys thought about that, because I was definitely thinking that's what I'd do with this Hefeweizen is I'd get to High Kreuzen right before I started a maturation rest. I'd probably close it down and then get back to more of a normal.
You certainly can.
Yeah,
I think in the case of what you're doing, I think that you're going to get you're not going to have to worry about contamination or anything the way you're doing it. But the thing is, if it's totally open and the Kreuzen is formed and bacteria and wild yeast are landing on top of the Kreuzen, if that whole thing falls back down into the fermenter, it's in your beer. The thing that the open fermentation people do is they skim the top at a certain point, and by the skimming, they're reducing the amount of that stuff that's in there. A lot of the old British breweries, they have what's called a parachute. It's like a cone, and it's on an adjustable crank, and they lower it down just so the top of the yeast just skims off down into the cone and goes down a pipe to the dump. And they can lower that a little further, however much they need. And then when it's time to harvest yeast, they crank it down a little bit further, and then they collect their yeast off of that through that same cone. And then they use that to pitch their next beer. So they've got clean yeast. They've gotten rid of the top, then they collect what's underneath that. They save that for pitching. And then maybe you get some stuff into that beer, but the beer is going to be consumed hopefully within, a short period of time before anything that might have gotten in there can have an effect.
Yeah. I mean, I have one more follow-up, but I don't know if you want to move on.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So my last one was, so at a homebrew scale where maybe you don't really want to be top cropping or doing any of this stuff with the open lid, would you think that kind of my model of, I was going to actually put a HEPA filter on this guy. So I'm pumping, hopefully, filtered air through there and try to keep it a little cleaner. And that way, maybe I don't have to worry about top cropping and worrying about bacteria falling back into my beer. So, okay. I'm really excited about this, and I'm not really much for top cropping. And
I think it's great. I think if you do it this way, you don't need to worry about top cropping or anything like that. And Hefeweizen, that's another beer where they do open ferments in Germany with Hefeweizen. So some breweries do, not all. But I think you're probably going to get a much better Hefeweizen.
I love Hefeweizen. So
send me there you go. I want to taste it.
That's what she said. Oh, sorry.
Come on, you can't be doing that sort of thing these days. All right, let's take one last break, and then we'll wrap up with one final question right after this.
Back to the two guys that know how to turn beer into beer. This is Brew Strong.
All right, we're back. Listen to Brew Strong, sponsored by Blickman Engineering, blickmanengineering.com. Check them out. They've been sponsoring this show for I don't know. How long have we been doing this? 16, 17 years?
Your 16 years, I think, is the first episode I can remember.
Jeez.
You
It's
have to
been a
catch
while.
that check before John. Oh, he's already out the door. Damn it.
Where John's listen back to the beginning of the show. We're having a party for John Blickman, retirement party in North Tahoe at Alibi Ale Works, May 4th, 2024. It's a Saturday. Come on out. You'll see us all there. Don't think Travis is going to make it, but Michael will be there. I'll be there. Blickman will be there. John Palmer will be there. And Kevin Drake will be there. And I think Justin Crosley will be there as well. Should be a lot of fun. Hey,
I can vouch for Alibi. They're one of the best breweries in our area. They make fantastic beer.
Yeah, great folks.
Great place to be. Yeah, great food. It's awesome.
It'll be a lot of fun. Gonna be a great party. Hey, Jamil and John, awesome show. My question is this. Yeast when using spunding valve is the topic. My question is this. If you transfer almost completely fermented beer, 3 to 4 gravity points remain, to a warm, sealed secondary, sealed with a spunding valve, with the purpose of using those remaining gravity points to naturally carbonate the beer, will your yeast harvests from the primary become less and less attenuative because of the less flocculent, probably more attenuative yeast that you transfer into the secondary each time? Thanks, Mason. Michael?
I would recommend...
did I give you 2 points for your answer for the partial pressure of gases?
I think you did.
At least 2.
I think that was excellent. Yes.
I don't know.
You've taken the lead.
I'm pushing the line on the jokes, though, I guess. So.
Yes. Yeah, you may start to lose a point.
They got it on The Office 10 million times. I think I'll be all right.
Okay. All right.
Anyways, so I could see this a couple ways. The big one for me is if you could at all put that on your primary and just spun the primary, then you would avoid all of this because you'd be staying on that same yeast cake and you'd have the same completion of the yeast. I'd worry that transferring with 3 to 4 Plato left, if that's left in fermentation, like you're at 1025 or something, 1030, you're going to end up with, yeast that does, not only doesn't attenuate, but you might end up selecting for yeast that doesn't finish and clean up the acetyl and acetaldehyde. So, I mean, you would know, Jamil, that's my worry though, is I'd be selecting for these yeasts that aren't finished yet and went to bed early.
Yeah. I think you give a solid answer on this. For example, getting back to Dusseldorf, they will be, like most German brewers, because they're not allowed to add carbon dioxide. They have to spund to carbonate their beer. The Dusseldorf brewers, they want a very lively, gassy beer to go into the keg because it's gravity poured and then, it froths up and that's how they get the head. So they will at, like 4 Plato, they will put the spunding valve on, and they'll do it in the main tank, put the spunding valve on, build up the CO2 pressure, and then they transfer once they've finished fermentation. So I agree with you. I think if you want to transfer, I would transfer a little more early. If you're only doing 3 to 4 gravity points,
What am I missing here? Why is Mason transferring at all?
I would think maybe his fermenter can't pressurize. He has to go somewhere where he can pressurize, which was my problem for a long time.
So he transfers into something he can,
like a keg. Yes.
Yeah. Gotcha. Okay.
So he doesn't want all the yeast in there.
Because his problem is generic to not just spunding, but anyone who's primary and secondary, and their primary yeast is not going to necessarily be the yeast they want to pitch over and over and over again.
Right. Well, you could either transfer the whole thing at that point, including all your yeast, leave some of the true behind
yeast
into your keg, spun, get it carbonated, and then transfer the thing again and collect your yeast that way. Or you could harvest your yeast at the beginning, and then you could harvest yeast off of the wherever you've set your beer to secondary, harvest the yeast off of that. You just mix the two together. There you go. You can do both.
I have one other idea. if you really want to get into the Reinheitsgebot, you could take some of that wort off before you pitch and save it, and then do what is it? Spritzel is the word, I think, or Kreuzening, where you'd have that Kreuzen in your keg, and then you just transfer onto that wort, and you'd basically be keg conditioning.
Yes.
With your spunding valve or whatever vessel you have that you can actually pressurize in, and bam, you've got and you can let your beer finish in the primary and go to the secondary with whatever yeast comes over is plenty, and you'll get nice, beautiful carbonation. So.
With that, you earn another point, and you have won the episode.
Great job, Mike.
Play the music.
Do I have to do like at the end of Whose Line and do some song or something?
Play the music.
I used to be a brewer, but then I quit our turkey.
I'll take some points back. Yeah.
You just lost a couple of points.
Don't
push it. You're gonna give Travis the win here. All right.
I'm an entertainer here, all right? I'm trying to be. You gotta be willing to risk it. And that is the end of
this episode. Many thanks to if you're listening live, stay tuned because we got another episode coming right up. We're sorry we started late. We had some technical difficulties with the Facebook and the Zoom, but other than that, we're rocking and rolling. We got a whole nother show coming up with in just a couple of minutes. We're going to take a quick break for grab another beer, and for those with walnut bladders to take care of that problem. But we'll be starting up just momentarily, so stay tuned. We won't even close this feed off. You can just stay on the same feed, and we will be with you back in very shortly. So thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all for sending an email to feedback@blickmanengineering.com and telling them how much you appreciate that they continue to sponsor the show, even though John Blickman's leaving. Make sure you do that, because it'll be important. Anyways, thanks to everybody. Brew strong.
Brew strong.
Brew strong, everyone.